Hey there, everybody. So nice to see all of you guys on here. Um, yeah, some of you are familiar faces, it looks like, and for those who I haven't talked to before, welcome. My name is Duncan Macdonald, and I'm going to be presenting today's webinar. We're going to talk about basically immune function and our mucosal barrier and how we can actually try to keep ourselves healthy during this sort of unprecedented time that we find ourselves in. I am, for some of you who have attended some of my previous webinars, I usually had my sort of industrial lights and magic set up at the clinic where I had an actual better background and everything else. But since we are all in shelter in place mode, this webinar is coming to you from my house. So not quite as fancy looking. Maybe for my next one, I can get a green screen up and try to do something more exciting. If somebody here could just type into the chat box that they can hear me, that would be helpful. Just want to make sure I'm not talking to a completely quiet room. Or you can raise your hand. Ah, cool, that works. Okay, I think the chat box may not be working. Okay, excellent. Just, I've done these webinars enough to know that you don't want to get 20 minutes in just to realize that your microphone isn't working. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I am an acupuncturist. I've been in practice for 21 years. I'm also a functional medicine practitioner, and I am an instructor. I'm sort of senior faculty at the Kalish Institute of Functional Medicine, which is where we train sort of the next generation of doctors in functional medicine. And just to define a couple terms, and here, let's move on to the next slide so you don't have to keep staring at my face. So functional medicine, when we refer to functional medicine, what we're actually referring to is a lab-based system of medicine where we go and we look at measuring ways in which physiology is going off the rails and then correcting those with both lifestyle and lab-based supplement programs. Okay, so that's sort of what functional medicine is. Chinese medicine has that same systems-based approach. It's looking at correcting underlying health problems in order to take care of symptom presentations. So both of these medicines are kind of like one and the same. They both sort of look at root cause pathology. They're both looking for underlying cause. So, right now, obviously, we are in this unprecedented time of stress. And for those of you who are in the Bay Area or on the West Coast or on the East Coast in New York, many of us are under sort of kind of shelter in place orders at this point. This is really something that none of us have really seen before. And it's important to keep in mind that we're getting all of these really great guidelines from the CDC and the World Health Organization in regards to washing our hands and making sure we don't touch our face because of those mucosal barriers that we're going to talk about in a minute. And social distancing, keeping a little bit away from one another in order to prevent spread. But I think that these strategies are so vital. At the same time, we have a huge agency in what's happening with our health. We have the ability to take action right now on what is going on with us. And we can, a stronger, more robust individual is less likely to contract any type of pathogenic invasion, whether it's a virus or a bacteria or, some kind of intestinal worm or whatever. Like the stronger our immune function is, the better we are able to repel all these things. And we see this all the time when we run these lab tests in functional medicine. We'll see people who have pretty strong immune systems and they present with, no infections across the board, and other people who have kind of lowered immune function and their lab tests will be lit up like a Christmas tree with all kinds of infections going on. So the point of all this is that I want everybody to realize how much power we have in focusing on our own health during this time in order to not only hopefully make it a little bit harder for us to contract or get sick with this particular COVID-19 virus, but also, many of us are walking around with other pre-existing health issues perhaps we hadn't done anything about in a long time. And we need to think about using this time to sort of shore up our health and using this time to inform ourselves about how to better our health. And maybe looking at, all of our schedules have been so insanely disrupted right now, right? But that sometimes gives us an opportunity to create some new structure for ourselves and to create a new situation where, we can develop a healthier routine for ourselves right now. So Dr. Dan Kalish and Dan Kalish is one of my mentors, and I'm collaborating with him on my functional medicine practice, as well as just a ton of other projects that we do together. But one of the things that we decided to do kind of last minute is that we are going to be teaching a series of these short classes. And my goal is to do at least 2 of these a week. I may end up doing more of them, I don't know. But we're getting all this information about how we can protect each other through the social distancing and cleaning of hands and surfaces. But there's all this other information about lifestyle, about caring for ourselves, about social connection during a time of social distancing, about the food we're eating, about the supplements we're taking, all of these different ways that we can take action ourselves and not feel like we are in a helpless situation that there is nothing we can do about, because that honestly couldn't be further from the truth. So just to quickly define a few terms, because I'm going to try to keep this presentation pretty short, okay? I'm going to try to keep it at about half an hour. So just to define a couple terms, in the title of this talk, we're talking about how we can measure and improve secretory IgA and mucosal immunity. So let's just talk about mucosal immunity for a minute, okay? So what am I actually talking about? So one of the things that is very important for us to understand is that the mucosal tissue of the body is like one integrated system, right? We have mucosal tissue running through our frontal sinuses and our upper respiratory tract. It comes down, it goes all the way through our lungs, it goes into our lower respiratory tract, which is where this particular virus seems to be causing a lot of problems for people. There is the same mucosal lining tissue that is in our urinary tract, in the vaginal tract, like all through the body, wherever you have mucosal tissue. And this is basically one integrated system. So if we have some kind of significant challenge at any point in that system, it can cause disruption of that mucosal barrier in other places, making it easy for pathogens to kind of waltz right in to our body and set up shop, okay? So how do we figure out how strong this mucosal system is? Well, luckily, there is an immune protein called secretory IgA, which is our frontline defense when it comes to this mucosal barrier. Secretory IgA is the immune response that keeps invaders out. And it is absolutely critical that we keep secretory IgA supported during this time. The penetrability of that mucosal lining is defined by how strong this secretory IgA is. Sometimes it's just called SIgA, you guys, just for kind of shorthand talk. I'm kind of used to teaching almost exclusively to other healthcare providers. So I'm going to try not to get bogged down into the weeds too much on some of the medical stuff. But please bear with me if I do. We're obviously putting these presentations together very last minute, and I have some core concepts that I want to get out, and the minutia is not important. Oh, and also, you don't need to take notes right now or anything. So I am going to be making some recommendations on how we can actually take effective action on improving these mucosal barriers. But I'm also going to email that to all of you guys. Okay, so just kind of like sit back and let some of this material just kind of absorb into the body and don't worry about taking notes. So the mucosal system is a system through the body. The strength and integrity of that system is based upon secretory IgA, right? But what determines the strength of secretory IgA? So in functional medicine or in Chinese medicine or naturopathic medicine, whenever we're looking at systems of the body, we always want to keep backing out. We're basically saying, okay, but why? But why? But why? We're looking for what actually is the best lever we can pull to actually influence the underlying physiology of the body. This is very different than taking like, oh, I caught a virus, I caught influenza, and I'm going to take Tamiflu and try to battle Tamiflu off. At that point, and there are antiviral herbs in Chinese medicine, and there's plenty of therapies that are like that. But we are looking at how can we strengthen up the body's natural defense against these. Because as you guys have probably heard, in respect to this virus, and this presentation is larger than just this virus, like we are all under an extreme, unprecedented amount of stress. And that is going to mean we have to think about our immune systems in regards to everything right now. But when we look at this particular virus and the limited information that we have, but it seems that 80% of cases are perhaps not appearing to be super severe or sort of a little bit asymptomatic. 20% of them can be quite severe, leading to hospitalizations or death. So obviously we have very good reason for wanting to take care of our immune systems and this mucosal tissue. So there's going to be a few key concepts that we're going to talk about. One of them is amino acids and cellular repair, right? So we want to be bringing in adequate proteins to the body so that we have all of these amino acids that kind of link together to form proteins that repair tissue, okay, all through the body. And we're going to talk a little bit about the fatty acids, the healthy fats that we take in that help to sort of create the cell membrane barriers that we have in the body. And we want to be able to keep those membranes healthy and sort of not fragile, which can happen if we have an intake of unhealthy fatty acids, okay? And then I'm going to give you guys some tips on what we can actually do about all of this and some supplement recommendations that I'm using right now, and I would basically recommend that everyone does. So as we move on here for a second though, let's just take a look at a brief glance at the scientific literature on secretory IgA. So remember, SIgA or secretory IgA is the immune protein that is the first line defense of our body in this mucosal barrier against foreign invaders. One of the ways that you can think about it almost is like secretory IgA. I don't know how many of you guys watch football, and I'm talking about American football here. Like if any of you guys are from overseas, which you very well might be, I'm talking about American football. I actually know an embarrassing little amount about soccer, so I don't even know if this analogy would make sense. But everybody lines up on the scrimmage line in football, right? You've got like one kind of skinny little guy who's the quarterback, and he's standing behind a bunch of like 300-pound massive beefcake guys who are going to protect him while he figures out who to throw the football to or what to do, right? And it's pretty good. It usually works. He's usually able to get that football off before they get through and stuff. But sometimes it doesn't. Well, think about that front line defenders as basically being secretory IgA. And if all of them just decided to like lie down as soon as the ball was snapped, then that would be a situation of low secretory IgA, allowing invaders to just freely come into the body, right? And that is what we definitely don't want. So for those of you who are have some background in medical research or that kind of thing, you're going to recognize some of these sort of studies in terms of PubMed. So PubMed is a government database of research studies that all of us have access to. Our tax dollars are at work. You know, you can see that there is a COVID kind of announcement here, sort of talking about it. They want people looking at this. And if you sort of do a search of mucosal immunity and secretory IgA and viral infections, for instance, there are thousands of studies. There are so many. And I just like grabbed a few just to give you an idea of the relevance of secretory IgA to our first line immunity, right? So here's one study that was just the role of mucosal immunity in influenza, you know, and it talks about how secretory antibodies appear to be desirable in the defense against mucosal virus infections. Specific secretory immunoglobulin, SIgA, can inhibit initial pathogen colonization and perform immune exclusion. Immune exclusion means we are excluding, right? We're the velvet rope at the club or whatever. We are excluding pathogens from coming into the body, right? So this is directly showing us the role of secretory IgA and how it works to exclude viral pathogens from crossing the barrier. Here's another one on mucosal immunity and viral infections. The mucosal surfaces are the first portals of entry for most infectious agents, among which respiratory and intestinal viruses are of the greatest epidemiological importance, which, you know, I think we could all agree right now. This suddenly seems way more important than it did 2 weeks ago, you know. As I say, hunkered down in my home. So you guys are getting the picture here. You know, here's another one talking about SIgA and its important role in the homeostasis regulation of intestinal, respiratory, urogenital. This is that connection I was telling you guys about how all of these mucosal systems, all these membrane systems, they're sort of an integrated whole within the body. So we see that SIgA is basically what regulates that. This was an interesting one, you guys. So interference of coronavirus infection by expression, basically, of SIgA and virus neutralizing antibodies. Doesn't virus neutralizing antibodies just have a sweet sound right now? Like, can I just take a shower in virus neutralizing antibodies? So this was interesting. This is not this coronavirus. A lot of people are going around referring to this virus as the coronavirus, right? But coronavirus is just a type of virus of which you know, we've always existed with coronaviruses. They cause the common cold and other things. But this is a particular study that showed that strong SIgA basically is our line of defense against this class of viruses. I mean, this is from 1997, right? So it's not this particular coronavirus, but it is coronaviruses in general. And this is just the role of nasal mucosa and secretory IgA in being a line of defense, right? This is why they're telling us all not to touch our face, right? This is why they're telling us to wash our hands for 20 seconds, to use hand sanitizer all the time, right? Is because they know that we're going to end up touching something and then touching our mucosal system. So there's two parts to this. There is the elimination of the touching and, the social distancing to get us away from droplets of saliva that could contain viral particles and to keep wiping down surfaces that are commonly used. But the other part that nobody is talking about is how do we keep that mucosal barrier strong? Because it's inevitable that we're going to expose ourselves to a highly contagious pathogen like this COVID-19. At the same time, we are swimming in pathogens all the time, right? Some of us may not even get a cold a year, and some of us feel like we're battling a cold all the time. Some of us have, allergy or asthma symptoms. Well, what's reactive airway symptoms? All these things that are underlying chronic conditions of concern right now in the presence of this. Why do those exist, right? Allergies exist, like nasal and frontal sinus type allergies or reactive airway type allergies. These exist when that mucosal barrier is disrupted, when the immune system has become either hyperactive or hypoactive within this mucosal barrier and secretory IgA has become disrupted. All right, and as you can see, I've got some kind of blank slide sitting there that shows you a little bit about how quickly I put some of this together. So in those key concepts that we were talking about, if we back up all the way, 50,000 foot view, we're now looking down at human health from the furthest backup we can do. And this is a very Chinese medicine concept, actually, because Chinese medicine talks about yin-yang theory, okay? Well, one of the theories that we talk about in functional medicine is anabolic versus catabolic physiology. And what that means is the body in a rested state where it's actually repairing tissue and it's normalizing body function? Or is it in a catabolic stress state? And this balance between anabolic and catabolic probably worked great for millions of years because life was probably super boring, punctuated by moments of terror where our stress hormones would surge out. And they have all these catabolic protective functions, right? They break down proteins and turn them into sugar to get us ready to fight or flight, or they basically shut down all non-necessary immediate functions like our gut and some of our immune pathways in order to free up energy to fight. But it was never designed to be chronically stimulated. And when we get chronic stimulation of this stress response, it leads to catabolic physiology. And that's where our bodies are just constantly breaking themselves down, right? And this is that sort of feeling that some of us have right now where it's like, oh God, just everything is falling apart. Like now my hair's falling out and my joints are starting to feel weird. And now I have some weird stomach problem that I didn't have before or something. This is all that catabolic physiology playing out its little dance within our bodies. So we have to try to maximize anabolic physiology while minimizing catabolic physiology. Because one of the things that catabolic physiology does is it rips apart our immune barrier in order to make sugar. So we're going to talk about that in a second, because there's a very specific amino acid that I'm referring to. So if we think about anabolic physiology, it's all dependent on amino acids. Amino acids are these little building blocks that the body can link together to make proteins to repair every type of tissue known to man, right? There's blood proteins, there's brain proteins, there's bone proteins, there's gut epithelium, that lining of the gut, those proteins, GALT, which is a particularly important in pathogen protection. There's all these different kinds of proteins, right? And they are built by amino acids. And the amino acid that is primarily responsible for mucosal tissue repair in the body is an amino acid called glutamine. And glutamine is often taken as a powder. And here's the thing about glutamine is that it is the easiest thing for the body to take under stress physiology and basically turn into sugar. So it will do that readily. And that's why, the body's like, oh, screw the gut lining. I'll rebuild that tomorrow. I'm just going to use this for energy right now, right? And that's what we don't want to happen. So let's take a look real quick at some testing, okay? So this is testing that we do every day in the clinic. And this is called PCR gut testing. And this is the exact same testing technology that the current COVID-19 test is on. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Well, I'll just say real briefly that we don't have an antibody test right now for COVID-19. So it's impossible to tell if someone who is asymptomatic has been exposed to it, has been sick with it in the past and recovered. We don't know that yet. The only testing that we have right now is PCR testing, where we're magnifying genetic particles and looking for the active virus in the body. If the body has cleared the virus, we may not get a positive result. And this is a big limitation with the testing. But this is a stool-based test that we use in origins medicine to look for pathogens broadly in the body. But one of the things it measures, and I'm going to go to the last slide of it here real fast, under intestinal health, we're able to measure secretory IgA, right? Right there, immune response, secretory IgA. In this patient, we can see that the normal range is 510 to 2000. In this patient, it came in at 104. So this is someone who stress physiology had kind of destroyed their secretory IgA. And this is another important thing for us to remember, is that the thing that dictates the health of secretory IgA, the thing that dictates the health of this marker right here, and whether it's going to be at 104 or nicely up at an 1800 or something, is cortisol. And cortisol is our primary stress hormone. Many of you have heard about it. It plays many critical roles in the body. Cortisol, we would drop dead without it. Like, cortisol is a necessary hormone, but it's also a catabolic hormone. And if it's signaling improperly in the body, it will lead to lowered immune function. It'll also screw up your sleep. It'll mess up your mood. It'll give you brain fog. It'll make you fat. It'll do all these other things too that we don't want. But for the purposes of our focus talk today, it messes with immune function. So this patient had very low secretory IgA. So that basically means that the barn door is open, right? We talked about those frontline defenders for the football quarterback. In a situation like this, those guys are all laying on the ground. And whoever wants to run in and tackle the quarterback can come in. And in this case, we're measuring normal bacteria flora here, but we're seeing some bacterial overgrowth. We're seeing things low. We're seeing dysbiosis starting to happen because that immune barrier is low. And then look at this. We got some botulism. We have some enterococcus. We have autoimmune triggers like Citrobacter happening here. So, these infections, they just sit there and inflame and irritate that mucosal barrier. So if these infections are present, there is no way to have healthy immune function. So one of the things in functional medicine that we do is we test for these infections and we get rid of them and we correct it so the body can have a healthy immune response. And this is more critical than ever right now, so, not to be plugging myself too much, but here's where we're going to take a brief commercial break, okay? Because my staff told me that if I don't do this, that they're going to disown me. And by the way, I've got some of the most awesome staff right now, you guys. There's not only within my clinic, which unfortunately had to close its doors because of this health crisis right now. And many of you have met Christina, my wonderful assistant uh, at Origins Medicine's physical site. But on the functional medicine side, I just have such a great team through Dan Kalish's team. And one of the people on that team, Jennifer, who is our health coach, is just incredible. I mean, she is a treasure, and I, I cannot recommend her enough right now in terms of somebody who can help keep your health on track. And if you're feeling like, oh, I feel like I'm falling apart. I wonder if, I wonder if this functional medicine testing and telemedicine is for me or something. You can do a free call with Jennifer, and she will walk you through. She'll listen to your problems. She'll figure out if you are a correct candidate for this type of work, whether you should work with me or whether there's something else you should do. So anyway, you can go to my website, originsmedicine.com. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. Okay, so the body takes these amino acids and it synthesizes them into these ribbon-like proteins. I'm going to skip this, you guys, because honestly, this is way more detail than we need. All I want you to take away from this is that we have a certain number of required essential amino acids, and the body synthesizes everything out of these essential amino acids. So we get these from food, right? And if you're, I think I have a slide on this. If you're vegetarian, you can get good protein sources in a vegetarian vegan diet if you're pretty careful and educated and good about it. We also get it from animal proteins, but you just want to, and in some cases, most Americans are not getting enough of these proteins. So let's talk about that real fast. So under normal physiology, where we are anabolic and we are not stressed, our protein needs are modest. Probably 0.8 grams to kilogram is a good measurement. But when we are in catabolic physiology, like all of us are now, because we're all so stressed, there is a turnover that's happening in the body in terms of protein use, and our needs are much higher. Like stress physiology, 1.2 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is what is needed. So you guys, you're probably not eating enough protein, okay? So we all need a good amount of protein in order for our bodies to repair these immune tissues and keep ourselves strong, all right? And you can also supplement with this. In the thing that I send you guys, I will have an amino acid supplementation in there. But if you're eating, like, you can use MyFitnessPal or one of those trackers to just kind of track and make sure you're getting that 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram, because that's what we need you to get, okay? Now, our cell membranes are all made of fatty acids, and I'm going to blow through this kind of quickly, but just understand that these fatty acid barriers are very critical in terms of this immune response as well. And it's critical right now that we get healthy fats into the body. So broadly speaking, we have omega-3 fatty acids and we have omega-6 fatty acids, and we've probably all heard of that, and they are both essential for life. This is one of those times where, like, we love to demonize one thing and like put something else on a pedestal, and for some reason for the last 20 years or 30 years, it's been all about omega-3s and no one talks about omega-6s. And that's because within our food supply, like processed foods, we have changed the ratio of these fats. But in order to get that ratio back to where it should be, we should all be supplementing with omega-3 fatty acids to keep those cellular membranes healthy, okay? And this could come from like flax or chia or hemp or whatever. Like, sometimes I'll have a smoothie in the morning where I grind up and have those things together. I also really like to eat pasture raised eggs that are high in omega-3 fatty acids. That's another great way. But I also take fish oil supplement. okay, in order to keep that balance. Okay, we're not going to talk about that. Okay, so we talked a little bit about catabolic physiology, and the only thing that I'm going to elaborate on from this slide, because it does really kind of point it out, these kind of blue lines here are the catabolic reactions, right? So the body can take protein, carbs, or fats and turn them into energy in the Krebs cycle to produce ATP, which is our currency of energy, right? It can do that, but it really prefers to use carbohydrate or fat. But when it gets under stress, it'll start gobbling up its protein and turn it, basically it runs it through a different process by which it cannibalizes our gut tissue and our mucosal barrier and turns it into that. And that's not what we want. So this shows you just a little bit of a relationship of how things happen. You know, up to this point doing functional medicine, usually the thing that would disrupt someone's stress hormones would be something like death or divorce or overwork or something like that. I had never really considered global pandemic stress as being one of them, but it is. So our stress hormones become dysregulated, and then we get catabolic and we get decreased immune response here, okay? And that leads to all kinds of problems in the gut. So remember that those mucosal barriers are an integrated system, but the majority of it is in your gut, okay? The majority of it is in your gut. And a tenet of functional medicine and Chinese medicine, there was a whole school for about 500 years in Chinese medicine about how if you focus on fixing the gut, you will fix the other problems of the body and the other immune issues. And so we always want to look at like how we can help the gut, get rid of infections, use supplementation like glutamine, you know, all these things that we can do to help improve the function of the gut to protect the immune system. And some of these slides I'm just going to blow through. This is more about catabolic physiology and how cortisol and the catecholamines like adrenaline, noradrenaline play this role at kind of long-term stress and starting to cannibalize the body's tissues, right? If this stress response, which is outlined here, is dysregulated chronically, then it starts to mess with thyroid hormone and we get other changes in the body which aren't great. So what are the recommendations that we're going to make here? Okay. The number one recommendation, lifestyle is always the strongest medicine. Okay. Always. What we do in functional medicine and Chinese medicine is try to correct the physiology so that people can have normal lifestyle. However, our lifestyles have been massively disrupted by this, right? And so more than ever, we need to think about rest. We need to think about exercise, and we need to think about staying in this kind of rhythm of nature where, you know, as it's getting dark, we're kind of winding down and we get some sun exposure in the morning. Hopefully you have a nice sunny backyard, or you can go for a walk where you can keep a distance of 6 feet or more from people. But we need to be resting, we need to be sleeping, we need to be focusing on our nutrition. Those are like the absolute, and then, you know, meditation. If you haven't started a practice, this would be a great time. You know, there's online resources too for like yoga. Uh, my wife Allison is organizing like a teleconference happy hour with some of her friends. Like we need to be doing what we can, right, to try to normalize our lifestyle and create an anabolic and healing kind of situation. From a hormonal side, so those stress hormones we talked about, those adrenal hormones, those are like the capstone. They sit at the top of your entire health. And if the stress response is dysregulated, everything else falls apart. So normally we always test this system before we make any recommendations from a hormonal side. And that is absolutely the best way to go. And under normal circumstances, you wouldn't even hear me making these recommendations. but these are abnormal times. So I'm going to make some off the cuff recommendations that are safe, but I would not normally do this because doing this from a lab-based approach is really the most effective way. And if you have the time or resources to run these labs and work with someone like me or Dan or something, that is absolutely the best way to go. But this path that we're showing here is the flow of cortisol, okay? So when the body is under stress, it's going to pull this precursor called pregnenolone away and steal it. And this is called pregnenolone steal. And the body will just keep pulling pregnenolone away. But when it pulls it away, DHEA, our primary anabolic hormone, the precursor to all the sex hormones, that starts to suffer and drop. And also as we age, DHEA starts to suffer and drop. So we can supplement with these. And these are hormones, you guys, so they are very powerful. So I want you to not exceed what I recommend here. And this will be in the notes that we send you. But for DHEA, we can, with a non-lab-based program, very comfortably get away with 25 milligrams per day, okay? There's another form of it that I like to use that's in a drop form that's absorbed through the mucosal tissue and bypasses the digestion. And the dosaging is a little bit different on that. So I'm going to give 2 dosages when I email this out to you guys, okay? But you know, do not exceed 25 milligrams, okay? DHEA is very powerful as an anabolic hormone for the body. It signals all kinds of beneficial changes, especially when we're under stress, because it is getting its precursor stolen away here. So it is suffering more than it normally would. And that's at the expense of all these downstream sex hormones and testosterone and stuff, right? And then the other thing is we can take a little bit of pregnenolone. And I would say 50 milligrams a day would be a very safe, non-lab-based dosage. Pregnenolone just is very interesting because when we supplement with it during stress, it takes pressure off this entire stress response. And that means that it sort of tricks the body into not being catabolic and destroying its mucosal immune barrier, right? So I would say, you know, let's stick to about 50 milligrams, or if you're using drops, which are my preferred way, go by the recommended drop dosage that I give you guys on the email, okay? The other thing that we want to think about taking is some type of very good multivitamin. Like I like to use what's called a multi-pack, which Designs for Health has a really good one that I'm going to recommend to you guys. And that's because we've all heard of vitamin C, like we should be taking 2 to 4 grams a day right now, and you know, D3 and magnesium, and you know, but to tell you the truth, all of these nutrients are important for our immune health. They all play critical roles. All the B vitamins are stress dependent. When we get more stressed, we use magnitudes more of them. And suddenly there isn't enough B vitamins for neurotransmitter production or for, you know, repairing gut tissue. And so they have these multi-packs that are designed for stress physiology. And we use them with all of our patients because then we can take that whole nutrient depletion part of the equation out. Like we don't have to think about that. So it has all of the B vitamins, it has like, you know, essential fatty acids, it has the magnesium, all the trace minerals, everything like that. Right now, we should all be taking something like that because our diets are a little weird because we're not getting to the store as much. We don't maybe have as much fresh produce as we would normally have in our diets. So it's pretty critical. And then I would say that increased magnesium as well, maybe 300 milligrams or something. I like magnesium citrate because it helps the digestion to move along a little bit better, and it also helps us sleep. So this is basically where I'm going to end this. And, you know, I'll be sending you guys out some information. Sorry it went a little bit longer than I intended, like twice as long, but there's just too much information, you guys. So I'm going to be doing this at least twice a week. I'm going to be covering the microbiome and its effect on our immune system next. I'm going to be doing one on sleep, one on anxiety, one on joint pain, one on nutrient markers. I'm going to be covering lifestyle factors, everything we can do. And as the situation evolves, my topics may evolve a little bit as well. I would really encourage all of you guys to go to my Facebook page, which is, it's Origins Medicine on Facebook, and like my Facebook page. I'm going to do most of my communicating through my Facebook page. And the reason for that is I do have an email list that you guys probably are on, because that's probably how you heard about this webinar. But I've been getting so many emails from every company I've ever been associated with right now about COVID related stuff. And I just feel like I don't want to spam up people's inboxes. So if you get an email from me, it's because it's something that I would actually really like you to see, like the follow-up from this webinar, for instance, with this supplement recommendations. But please like us on social media and follow us on social media, and I'll be rolling out the schedule of these talks. Feel free to email me if you have talks that you would like to see covered. And we're all a little housebound right now, and I'm going to take this time to support my patient base and all the other people who follow Origins Medicine and are interested in this. Please share with your friends and family. Get them to come if you feel like they could get some value out of these lectures. Like, I want to use this time to support you guys. That's the only thing I feel like that I can do right now. So anyway, I really appreciate your time. And with that, I will wrap this one up, and I'll talk to you guys later, okay? So thanks a lot.